say your district that you're coming from, you are going to cheer. Okay, are we ready? We're going to go through all of them, starting with Winnetka. Who is coming from Winnetka?
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. Thank you. We are heroes, healing everyday racism in our schools. And thank you for coming to our Hidden Stories of the North Shore, a call to action initiative. I am humbled to be standing here on this spot where Dr. Martin Luther King spoke in 1965. My name is Jennifer Lind, and on behalf of Heroes, welcome. Healing everyday racism in our schools is our name and our aim, and we are delighted to see so many people here today to explore our local history in an effort to mobilize, to organize, to energize ourselves and our township, to become more inclusive, to create more fair and equitable policies, and to become a truly beloved community for everyone. My husband and I raised our 4 children in Wilmette. They went to New Trier and its feeder schools. They received a strong academic education in many ways. However, we've seen too often, and especially this past year, that not all students in our local schools thrive. Students of color have learned an unspoken curriculum when they don't see teachers who look like them or feel safe and supported when confronted with unspeakable acts of racism. I invite you to look carefully at both the beauty and the hurt that exists beneath the surface in our community and in our schools so that we can build a better, supportive community for all students. When I think of hidden stories, I am reminded of a visit I paid to the Frederick Douglass homestead in Washington, D.C. while I was a student. Perched high above the Potomac, Cedar Hill was Douglass's home until his death in 1895. All of his possessions were carefully preserved by his wife, Helen Pitts, who lived until 1903 in that home. I was alone with the tour guide, another 2 or 3 visitors at the most. The nearly empty Douglass homestead then let me spend a lot of time talking to the tour guide. I was able to carefully ponder his legacy. This, of course, is in stark contrast to the crowds that go to Mount Vernon and Monticello with coach buses from around the country. Inside Cedar Hill, one gem particularly caught my attention. In fact, I went on to do my senior thesis about this one gem. A framed letter by the famed abolitionist he wrote to Horace Greeley, a New York publisher, when he was in Scotland. Quote, "I am one of those who think the best friend of a nation is he who faithfully rebukes her, and her worst enemy under the specious garb and popular garb of patriotism seeks to excuse and palliate and defend them." Let Douglass's inspiring words that feel ever so relevant today inspire us today. I invite all of you here today, friends, parents, teenagers, neighbors, residents of the New Trier Township, to be our community's devoted friends and critics. Let's work to recognize both our local triumphs alongside our tragedies. Explore how they are intertwined, tangled, and interwoven to make up our neighborhoods as well as our country today. Let's look within our local community, our faith organizations, our schools, our networks, and inside our 4 walls, in our homes, and inside ourselves to celebrate both our achievements and reckon with our shortcomings. Begin with the past. Consider the local wounds of the legacy of slavery, of segregation, Jim Crow, and redlining here in the New Trier Township. As we meet in this space, this exact space where Dr. King spoke 56 years ago about his dream and our dream for a beloved community. Let's learn from South Africa and Germany. They have created cultures of remembrance in the countries of the perpetrator. Let's be the true beacon on a hill that is honest about its past in order to create a more equitable future for all Americans. Once we explore and talk about our local history, the history of race and racism, we can see how this history shapes our attitudes toward race. Then we don't have to be hostage to it. The echoes of these past hidden stories can energize us to find hope in the midst of hostility, triumph over tragedy, love over hate. Let's faithfully critique our local government, our schools, our institutions, rather than excuse and defend their failings and our failings. Let's create an inclusive, respectful identity in the New Trier Township. Let's do our best to talk about our history of race and be willing to commit ourselves to truth and reconciliation. Truth must come before reconciliation. Let's pause on this day, Juneteenth, a national holiday, to commit to learning beyond our limited understanding of local history and delve into the history of all Americans. Before we can sincerely celebrate emancipation and freedom on Juneteenth, we must pause to reflect upon the deep human toll of slavery and examine a wide range of issues that are relevant to addressing the ongoing discrimination here in our community. Fellow white residents, we don't have to care about racism in our immediate daily lives. However, when we don't care about racism, our positive accomplishments of our excellent schools and community organizations, our science, our artistic accomplishments, they are diminished and shadowed by our shortcomings, by the fact that these opportunities of education and safety are not shared by all. Let's consider the words of Václav Havel, the Czech and global civil rights leader who spoke of the orientation of the spirit, the willingness to engage in both our mind and our creative and scientific achievements, as well as our heart to care about the excluded and the dispossessed. Let's embrace this mind-heart connection Havel spoke of to move beyond our past and current segregation with more equitable local governance and education. Let's move beyond indifference to racism to allow more Americans, including people of color, to share in the wonderful things that our community offers us. As a white woman standing here alongside you, there are literally countless ways that I cannot ever understand the world as people of color have to navigate it every day. I recognize that, and as I embrace summer with days at the beach, at the pool, outdoor barbecues, concerts, picnics, playing outdoors, I recognize that people of color in the Chicagoland area brace for violence and hyper-surveillance with more aggressive policing than in our community. And people of color who come to and through our neighborhoods, they cannot relax and feel safe as we do. Raised with a whitewashed education, we learn this unspoken curriculum that life would be easier, safer, more comfortable for me because of the color of my skin. As white people, we were taught a presumption of not just innocence, but exceptionalism. That is not authentic, that is not true, and that is not fair. That sense of exceptionalism is not based on trust. It's based on unearned advantage and selective histories that we are taught in our schools. So in conclusion, I invite you neighbors, friends, let's work together as allies, explore our hidden histories here today that our teenagers have prepared for us and our local community organizations offer us. Let's engage in dismantling racism, this racism that hurts all of us. Not one of us can thrive if everyone does not thrive. I'll end with a quote from Lilla Watson, an Indigenous Australian artist who says, "If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together." Let's work together. As Dr. King said, the time is always right to do what is right. If you cannot find a partner, be a partner. If you cannot find an ally, be an ally. If you cannot find the light, be the light. Friends, neighbors, let's step up. Let's begin with the past. Let's get more involved. Make a plan. Take steps. Be courageous on this imperfect journey. Let's work together to truly create policies to build a beloved community in our New Trier Township. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And here's my dear friend, Pat Savage-Williams.
Awesome. Was that great? Thank you, Jennifer. Jennifer put this whole thing together. Jennifer and her team has been working tirelessly for months. And I have to say, and I will say, it's not a part of my speech, that I do equity work in this community often. And when I do equity work, I run into opposition and roadblocks. Some are very intentional. Jennifer and her team had that experience over the last few months. So I just want you to know, even a few weeks ago, we didn't know if we would be here. So I'm really glad we're here. So thank you, Jennifer. And thank you for persisting. Thank you for all your work. So my name is Pat Savage Williams. I work at New Trier High School, and part of my job at New Trier is to lead conversations, both formal and informal, about equity. And so I do that at New Trier on a regular basis, and I told you that sometimes it's hard, but I persist, and I will continue to persist. I'm also on the school board for Evanston Township High School, and I just have to say that sometimes I feel like the experience that I have in Evanston and the experience that I have in New Trier is the exact same experience. Folks talk about how different those places are. Not so. And I just want you to know that I've been thinking a lot about all this competition between Evanston and New Trier, and I'm ready to get rid of that. It's not healthy. And if we're going to beat this thing, we have to bond as communities, and we have to work together. We are neighbors. We are the same, right? When you cross the street and cross into Evanston or cross into Wilmette, you don't even know you're in the different community because we're all the same, right? All right, so now. Juneteenth. And if you want to know more about Juneteenth, you can read my T-shirt. Yeah, I got it covered. I tried to get everything on here. Or the T-shirt of my husband right there. So Juneteenth is now a national holiday. So I am hugely believe that Juneteenth is a national holiday. I can tell you I am. But when I first heard it, I hesitated to celebrate. So Juneteenth was known as Emancipation Day or Black Independence Day. It marks 1865 date when Major General Gordon Granger arrived with federal troops in Galveston, Texas, and issued an order freeing the nation's last slaves. But 2.5 years prior to that, the Emancipation Proclamation was issued by President Abraham Lincoln. And that was issued on January 1st, 1863, as the nation approached its third year of the bloody Civil War. So, all slaves in the Confederate States were technically freed on January 1st, 1863, but it took 2.5 years for the 250,000 enslaved people in Texas to learn of this and to be freed. Why is this important? Why is it important for us to review that today? It's important because it's important to get our history correct, right? We need to know what our history is. Because if we don't get our history correct, it will be rewritten. We see that today. We see that from just a few months ago, that folks are trying to rewrite history, and the implications and consequences of the past will not be connected to the realities of the present. Our history is complex, and we are consistently fighting for freedom, and it's important for us to make sure that we understand that this fight for freedom has been going on for centuries. It didn't just start, and when we don't see the progress that we want to see, we can't say, well, you've been doing this now for 5 years. Why haven't you made any progress? Well, we've not made progress because it's been going on for centuries, and it takes a little more time than a few years to undo what's been happening for centuries.
Yeah. Amen.
So Juneteenth is neither the beginning or the end of anything. The celebration of Juneteenth today is important because it helps us initiate the difficult conversations and raises awareness about the country's complicated and tragic history of slavery and racial injustice. It is immensely important to remember the longevity for this fight. Juneteenth has become a symbol for the emancipation and provides a highly visible bridge to get these difficult conversations started. Remember, these basic rights continue to be present in our society and continue to be challenged. The right to vote is under siege. And I know that, and you know that. Housing, education, even worship. How did churches form the way they're formed? I go to a church in Evanston, and my church was formed because the church that was originally the church that we came from was sending the black folks up to the balcony. And so they got tired of it and came out of it and formed their own church. So that's the complicated history. So that's why I'm not celebrating. And I want to see the patterns of our history that are impacting us today be recognized. Over the last 15 months, we can think about what our history has taught us. Over the last 15 months, I've seen Black and brown people get sick and die at a disproportionate number from the coronavirus. I've seen my people die at the hands of the police. When George Floyd was murdered, the entire world watched and watched and watched. And still what we had to do to get that verdict was prove it over and over beyond a shadow of a doubt. And even with that, 229 Black people have been killed by the police since George Floyd died. Attempts to hold the police accountable is meeting with strong opposition. There are attempts to take away the basic voting rights of people, and to my heart, schools are even being told that teachers cannot teach the true history of the complexity of race in the classroom. That would mean that teachers cannot teach what Juneteenth really means, or other hidden stories that we've been reviewing over the last few weeks from our community of the North Shore. Some of you who are here may be saying, yeah, that's true, but she's not talking about me. So let me just say very clearly, I'm talking about you. Talking about everybody here. I'm not here to try to make anybody feel guilty. I'm not here for blame, shame, or guilt. You know, that's one of my things. No blame, no shame, no guilt. I am here so that you can understand, so that you will commit to learning and gaining knowledge and believing, because beliefs inform action. So we are calling this the call to action. Your actions will not change if your beliefs don't. Over the last few weeks, Heroes has exposed many of you to information that you haven't known. This includes the history of how our community became what it is today, what it looks like today, why it is so predominantly white. What does that mean? It's complex, yet it's not. It's not accidental. It didn't just happen. Heroes gave you the opportunity to learn, listen, and ask questions. All that is necessary before pointing to action. Learning and educating yourself is ongoing. Heroes introduced the topics of history, the history of this community, houses of worship, and what houses of worship can do. And education, what are educators doing? There is always, of course, more to learn. So do not let your learning stop. Don't ever think you know everything. Keep doing all those things that help you understand. I talk about habits. What are your habits? What habits do you have that keep you in the process of learning and keep your racial lenses on? What are you in the habits of reading? What are you in the habit of watching? How do you watch TV? And whatever you watch on TV, do you watch it with a racial lens?
Yep.
And that includes commercials. Do you watch them with racial lens? They're doing a lot with commercials.
Oh, yeah.
And these marketing companies are very thoughtful about everything they put on that commercial. So think about that. What do you read? What do you go for vacation? What museums do you choose to go to? What do you notice and what do you not notice? Get proximate, and that means putting yourself in a space where you are exposed to people of color and really learn about them. Really develop relationships and trust, not superficial. As you prepare your action, I want you to think about your habits. And I want you to get close and think about a quote from Ibram X. Kendi. And if you don't know who he is, it's okay. We all have phones. You can look him up. Ibram X. Kendi explains and writes this. One either allows racial inequities to persevere as a racist or confronts racial inequities as an anti-racist. There is no in-between safe space of non-racist. The claim of not racist, neutrality, is the mask of racism. So I'm going to say that again. There is no such thing as neutral. In this case, you are either racist or non-racist. There's no in between.
Yep. It's true. Thank you.
So I'm going to ask you one question that I want you all to just take in and think about, and you don't have to answer this today because it's a deep one. How will you confront racial inequities in the neutral community? How will you do that? What will you do? What will you do? What is in your purview? What is in your circle of influence? What agency do you have? That's what I want you to think about. And then I will celebrate.
Yeah.
I will celebrate when I see white people teaching other white people about race. I will celebrate when white people recognize that they have a race and they have a different experience and they acknowledge their race and their different experience. Then I will celebrate. I will celebrate when white people believe me and don't ask me to tell them another example.
Right.
I will celebrate when white people stop saying to me, "Are you sure? Are you sure? Maybe you took that the wrong way." I will celebrate when I see white people trying, working, learning, understanding, and engaging other white people. I'm not looking for perfection. I will give you grace, and I want you to give each other grace.
Amen. Yep.
I'm not trying to put you in a position of being so uncomfortable that you can't continue to try because you're worried about saying the right thing. It's messy, right?
Yeah.
When Juneteenth happened, it was messy. It took a while, and it's still not happening yet. So it's messy, and everybody who engages in this work understands the discomfort and the need to continue and stumble and learn and move forward. So talk to your colleagues, talk to your family about race, talk to your children, no matter how young they are, and I see some cute little children running around here. They all notice. Talk to them about race. and help them notice and help them watch you struggle with this issue, because it's not going away. We're not going away. We're going to be here. And as much as I struggle at New Trier and in this community, I'm here. So once again, I'll leave you with my big question. How will you confront racial inequities in the New Trier community? What will you do? And I'm going to turn the mic over to Pastor Braun.
Thank you, Pat. My name is Jeff Braun. It's my privilege to serve as senior pastor at Winnetka Congregational Church. But I want to assure you that I stand here on behalf of all the faith communities in the New Trier Township, all the faith leaders who are engaged in this important and collaborative, this communal work. So you may hear my voice, as my daughters always say, "Dad, just don't talk too long." But you will hear theirs as well. Channel less of font. Before I offer a few remarks, I want to thank Jennifer and Heroes, and I want to say a remark about our youth, both those that are involved with Heroes and everyone who is here today, and any youth in our community who has been in some way involved in or thinking about getting involved with this work. Your energy is amazing. And you know, yes, let's hear it. I was young once, as my beard does not indicate in any way. But when the dinosaurs roamed the earth and I was young, well, they were just before me. There's a lot of knowing laughter down here, okay? You must be my age. I heard adults say that. They said things like that, like, yeah, your energy is amazing. It is. And we need it. Because this work is slow and muddy and messy and iterative, slower than it should be. We need your energy. And for anyone else here who has that youthfulness of heart, we need your energy as well. So thank you for being here. This is where the youth applaud for the older folks. That's right. Hear how that clapping is more vigorous? You can hear their youth. So thank you. While I was in divinity school, I was blessed to study with many learned people. People of both great intellect, but also of great heart. People who were instrumental in my formation as a minister, as a Christian, which I happen to be, and more deeply, as a human being. To say that my graduate years were formative would be a gross understatement. But of all the things I learned, all the wisdom that I humbly and hungrily assimilated, one clarifying phrase, one distilled truth, continues to ring out more than any other. The phrase came from Dr. Gilbert Bond, a professor of African American history and black theology, and himself a black man, as he was teaching a course about how Christianity developed among the New World Africans who had been captured, forced to endure the lethal and utterly inhumane Middle Passage, and then cruelly bonded as chattel slaves here in America. One day in class, a fellow student asked a question. It was not a question about God per se, but Dr. Bond's keen intellect allowed him to see that at the heart of the question was a presumption about the nature of God, a flawed presumption. So instead of answering the question on its face, Dr. Bond, being the brilliant professor that he was, chose to address the flawed premise from which the question rose. With words that still course through my consciousness, Dr. Bond said, and I quote, "We worship a God not of the tyrannical either or, but rather of the mysterious and liberating both and." not a God of false binaries, which we humans are constantly tempted to contrive, but rather a God of divine paradox and of blessed coexistence. End quote. In our heart of hearts, I think we know that our goal is not a narrative of the either or. Our goal is not a narrative of one over the other. Our goal is a narrative of one with the other and of one for and beside the other. Our goal is not a narrative of us versus them. It's a narrative of just us. All of us. And of the justice that allows that narrative to rise for the good of everyone. No matter the arbitrary and God-defined tone of our skin. Thank you for the privilege to be able to be with you today. We need all your energy and the energy that of those folks to whom you speak and share this important work. Thank you, and a round of applause again for heroes for their leadership.
Well, you know the difficulty of following four speakers. All had everything I would have said. So I'm going to rely on my heart. And as I rely on my heart, I will try to be kind and sweet as I talk to you about hidden stories. 10 generations back, on my father's side, were slaves, people who were enslaved. 8 generations back, on my mother's side, my family was slaves. In this area, in 1869, Winnetka was founded. There were 16 other villages around here that were founded. 1869? Why, it was 1865 that the slaves were freed. So they couldn't have houses. They barely spoke English clearly. This is not a history that is easy to tell, nor is it a history that is easy to hear. Hidden stories, I could tell you many stories that are hidden. What I'm upset about is that I came through the schools of North Carolina during segregated America, and I didn't hear my history. I heard the history that was made for me to hear. It's the same history you heard. Same books come out of Texas. We can't change those. We can't amend them. Today, they might make our children, they might upset them. This is truth. And the truth is very difficult to tell easily. I think about you being here. And you being here makes me think again about what happened 56 years ago right here. Martin Luther King was here. He stood somewhere in this area and he talked to the most people who had ever gathered in Winnetka and probably the North Shore. And he talked about all the things you've already heard. But he wanted all the people who showed up to leave ready to do something. 56 years ago. So here we are, 56 years later. And the people who are here are like the people who were there. They wanted to hear Dr. Martin Luther King. They wanted to stand up for freedom, for equality, for diversity. And that's why he came. When I think about our history, I have to think about growing up where I was not one of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 black people, African Americans in a group. At that time, I was with all of my people. I wasn't able to come here, but in 1963, I did go to Washington, D.C., and I heard Dr. King on the Mall. Now, let me tell you how I felt as I got off the bus as a young man with a whole bus of people from Greensboro, North Carolina. I was amazed at how white many people had come.
Yep.
I had never seen white people coming to something that was for equality, my equality.
Woo-hoo.
It was an unbelievable feeling. But it was a feeling that locked in me that the only way we can do this is that all of us are doing something. I think about how it was, and let me tell you what I thought about this morning as I arrived in Winnetka. I parked over in the city, and I started walking. I looked at my phone and said, "Oh, now where's the park?" I've never driven up here. I've walked up. I've come from this way, but never come from that way. And while I'm on the street, a police car goes by me very slowly. I'm too old to be afraid of police, but I was afraid. I started wondering, are they trying to check me out? So I came on around, got over here, and I said, oh, I could park over here. So I went back to get my car. I started back up the street. Same police, it looked like, rode past me very slowly. I'm now thinking, let me walk my best walk. Let me be my best black man in a white neighborhood, because I don't know what they're thinking. So I walk. I get my car, and I come back around, and now I see a police car in the parking lot, right where they could watch what's going on. I again thought, let me make sure I put my signal on when I'm going to turn early enough. Let me be sure I'm riding on my side of the street. Let me be sure that my seat belt is on. How many of you go through this every day? Every day. Look at the hand. Look who it goes. So I'm nervous, but I'm confident that I can get here with no trouble. I park over here, get over here, and I pull over here in a park. And the good side of this is, you see the lady out here with the green vest on? Nice. I got out of my car, and she said, when I got out of my car, she said, hey, and I didn't know what she wanted. I said, well, I'm going to have to go over and see what she wanted. I walked over to her. She said, I'm Officer, whatever her name is. She said, I'm glad to see you. I hope you have a nice affair. I said, oh, God. It was a nice person. I never know when I'm going to run into a nice person. So I'm in my 70s. 70s. It's been a long time. And I know that if you're here, you want to do something. And I know if you're here and you want to do something, I can suggest some things you do. First, don't go away just happy that you came. Because that's what everybody goes away happy. But happy to do something after you leave. Now, what is it you're going to do? Well, if we're talking about our schools, right now, 0.6, maybe as much as 1% black at Nutria. That's what healing everyday racism in our schools. All of you who are members, raise your hand so people can see who these people are. These people said, we really have to do something about just a few teachers, maybe a dozen. That's on the high side. And then students, and their Pat knows exactly what it is. But I know whatever I say won't be enough. I mean, we have to have a whole lot more. But how do we get more? How do we get black students? Where are we going to get them from? I said, Winnetka was founded in 1869. It was founded like all the other 16 villages around here, with no intention of there being black people here. Now, it wasn't that all the people who were here hated black people. Right. It's just, it was intended to be for rather affluent white people. So where could we be? The closest place we could be would be to work in your homes. Mm-hmm. That would be the closest place. Sometimes you got to meet us, and you got to meet us and found out, oh, these are nice people. Mm-hmm. She's so sweet. Uh-huh. I just love her. But she can't live up here. Mm-hmm. She can't buy a house up here. So what do? This is a challenge. This is a challenge to all of us. I happen to live in Wilmette. I don't know how. It was years and years and years of work. Years and years of work having some white person along the way helping me. When we look at history, and when we look at the lost history, my ancestors had to learn to speak English. When you look at churches being built, finally, churches were being built for African Americans. You heard Pat talk about this. They were being built by African Americans for them. And many of them started in the late 1800s. Historically, black schools practically all formed in the last decade of 1800. Why did they form? Because we couldn't go to the colleges. You had to be very special to even be considered to go to a college. So this is history that isn't all that pretty. But it's history that we have to know about. And we have to know about it in order to be nudged to do something about it. I'll share a quotation of Dr. King, who was right here. And he said this. And this is 56 years ago. He said, "Every white person does great injury to his child if he allows that child to grow up in a world that is 2/3 colored and yet live in conditions where that child does not come into person-to-person contact with colored people." That's what he said. That's what he said when he was here 56 years ago. Heroes is here because that still is what we need to do. So how are we going to do it? It's going to take an army. But it's going to take you and me. As Pat said, I'm here. I could easily not be here because it takes a lot to come out, to exist in a place where everybody is white. So I encourage you all to not just be satisfied with having heard this, not just be satisfied with coming here to be with those who did come, but let's talk to our school boards. Let's talk to our housing. You know, Martin Luther King came here because of housing. He came here for housing. Okay, you know there are black people who can live here. They don't even have to have affordable housing. They could live here. But they won't live here until this community is welcoming. They won't be here until we have things that support them as well. So we have a lot to think about. I know that I've my cup runneth over, and I've gotten probably as much about it out that I can, and not have you throwing things at me. So I'm glad you're here. Thank you for coming. Please support us, and don't just support us by saying you support us. Support us by deciding to do something. And I know that there are people who smile and they say equity, diversity, they say all the right things, except we're going to do something about history in our schools. We're going to do something about the way this North Shore looks. And I'm counting on you. I'm there to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.